The Vatican City, the heart of Catholicism, is often imagined as the safest and holiest ground on earth. Millions flock every year to see the majestic St. Peter's Basilica, the Sistine Chapel, the ancient archives said to contain secrets spanning centuries. But as the sun sets behind Rome, skyline and the golden glow fades from the dome of St. Peter's, the Vatican changes. The walls grow silent, the shadows stretch unnaturally long, and for those unlucky enough to wander the stone corridors at night, the city of God transforms into something far darker, a place of whispered voices, unseen eyes, and corridors that seem to breathe with secrets long buried. One such story comes from a Swiss guard on watch duty, a man whose name was never released to the public. It was past midnight, sometime in the late 1980s, when he reported hearing low chanting coming from beneath the Apostolic Palace. Guards are trained to ignore sounds, to remain professional. But this wasn't the creak of pipes or the shuffle of rats. This was chanting, human voices. The rhythm was steady, deliberate, like a ritual. Following the sound down into one of the forbidden tunnels, the guard later swore he saw a woman. She was draped in black, her figure half translucent, moving without footsteps. Her face was pale, framed by long dark hair, and her lips moved in silent words as though she were finishing a prayer that had been whispered for centuries. He reached for his weapon, but in that very moment the figure turned its head toward him. What he saw in her eyes froze him in place. They were burning, not with fire, but with something older, something hateful. And just as suddenly as she appeared, she vanished into the stone wall. The guard refused to speak of it again, but the story leaked among Vatican staff, whispered with fear. The witch had returned. And so, I must ask you, before we uncover the terrifying truth, do you believe the Vatican, the holiest city on earth, could be hiding a ghost, or worse, a curse? Before we step into the shadows of these stories, before we peel back the layers of marble and scripture to reveal the witch said to still haunt these sacred stones, take a moment now, subscribe to our channel, not only so you don't miss the chilling journey ahead, but because tonight's tale is not the kind you want to wander into alone. Trust me, what you are about to hear will cling to you long after this story ends. Because behind the painted ceilings and gilded altars lies another Vatican, a darker one whispered of in hushed tones, hidden in forbidden documents, and feared even by popes themselves. A Vatican not of salvation, but of secrets, sorcery, and an eternal curse. But who was this so-called witch of the Vatican? And how could such a figure exist in the very heart of Christianity's power? The legend begins centuries ago in the late Renaissance, when Rome was not just a center of religion, but also a hotbed of political intrigue, science, and most dangerously, witchcraft. It is said that in the 1500s, a woman appeared in Rome unlike any the city had seen. Described as beautiful, yet unsettling, her eyes carried an intensity that unnerved even priests. She was no street wanderer, nor did she beg for alms. She was educated, fluent in Latin, and she knew things about the Vatican stones, its foundations, its secret chambers, that no outsider should have known. Locals whispered she could heal the sick with a touch. Others claimed she cursed those who crossed her. One story even tells of a cardinal who mocked her in public, only to collapse dead 3 nights later, his body twisted in agony, as though crushed by unseen hands. Rome knew her as a strega, a witch, and when whispers reached the Vatican itself, fear rippled through its halls, not just because of what she could do, but because of where she lingered. She was often seen near the very walls of St. Peter's Basilica, sometimes standing silently as though listening to the stones themselves, other times vanishing through side doors no commoner could access. How did she enter? Who allowed her in? No one ever knew. Yet the fear grew deeper because some said she wasn't just any witch. She was a keeper of ancient rites, older than Christianity, tied to the very stones of Rome. Long before St. Peter's Basilica, Long before the Vatican stood as it does today, that land had been a necropolis, an ancient Roman burial ground, graves, tombs, forgotten shrines to gods long lost. Could it be that this witch carried with her the power of those old gods, feeding on the sacred stones themselves? The Vatican moved quickly to silence her. Documents suggest she was captured and interrogated in the depths of the Apostolic Palace, tried in secret for heresy and sorcery. But here is where the records grow strange. Unlike most women accused of witchcraft, there is no record of her execution. No burning, no hanging, no burial. She simply vanishes from the archives. It is as though she was erased, not just from history, but from existence. Yet her ghostly figure, sightings of a woman in black with burning eyes, continued to haunt Vatican guards, priests, and even tourists centuries later. And whispers of her curse still echo. If you walk the crypt beneath St. Peter's at the wrong hour, when the air is cold and the stones drip with unseen moisture, you may hear her voice, chanting words in a language older than Latin. But why did the Vatican fear her so much? Why not simply execute her like they did with so many others accused of sorcery? The answer, perhaps, lies in what she knew. Because some claim that the witch had discovered the Vatican's greatest secret, a relic buried in the foundation stones themselves, a relic so dark that even the popes dared not speak of it. What relic was this? Was it a cursed stone carried from the ruins of pagan Rome? Was it an idol buried under the basilica to trap its power? Or was it something far worse, something the witch sought to control and the Vatican tried to hide? We may never know for certain. But one thing is clear, the witch of the Vatican was no ordinary woman. She was a shadow woven into the very fabric of Rome, tied not to life, but to stone, curse, and eternity. And as the centuries passed, her legend did not fade. It grew, because the Vatican may have silenced her body, but they could not silence her spirit. The witch was still there, watching, waiting. But what if I told you that the witch of the Vatican was not the first, nor the last? That across Rome's history, whispers of sorcery and cursed relics within the Vatican walls appear again and again, like cracks in marble that cannot be mended. And in our next descent into this story, we will follow those cracks, straight into the heart of the sacred stones themselves. They say stone never forgets. Every footstep, every drop of blood, every whispered prayer is absorbed into the walls, into the ground, into the foundations that lie deeper than memory itself. And beneath the Vatican, the stones are older than Christianity, older than the Bible, older than Rome itself. If the witch was bound to anything, it was not flesh and bone. It was these stones. The Vatican sits atop what was once a sprawling Roman necropolis, a city of the dead. Long before pilgrims lined up to kiss the feet of St. Peter's statue, pagans buried their loved ones beneath this ground. Archaeologists, who've dared to descend into the catacombs beneath the basilica, describe it as a labyrinth of ancient tombs, inscriptions to forgotten gods, and crumbling walls painted with figures of spirits, serpents, and winged beings. Some of these tombs were sealed centuries before the first church was ever built. But here's where the story twists. When construction of the old St. Peter's Basilica began in the 4th century, workers unearthed strange relics, fragments of statues, offerings, and even ritual stones marked with carvings no one could translate. Rather than discard them, many were reburied within the foundations themselves, trapped beneath the holy ground like fossils of faiths long dead. Now imagine, stones once prayed over by pagan priests, stones that drank the blood of ancient sacrifices, locked beneath the Vatican's holiest church, stones humming with energies that did not belong to Christianity. It was these stones, some claim, that drew the witch centuries later, not by accident, not by coincidence. She came because she could hear them, the way a moth is drawn to flame. There are stories from masons and workers in Renaissance Rome who swore they saw her near the excavation pits during church renovations. She would stand still, silent, sometimes for hours, her palm pressed against the foundation walls, as though listening to whispers in the rock. When chased away, she would laugh, not mockingly, but knowingly, like someone who understood something no one else could. One Mason even confessed, before his mysterious death, that he heard her murmur, "The stones are not yours to bury, they belong to me." And what makes this more disturbing is that even today, the Vatican admits to guarding a hidden chamber beneath the basilica. Few are allowed inside, but rumors speak of an altar made not of marble, but of rough pagan stone, said to predate Christianity by centuries. No photographs exist, no documentation is publicly available. But the whispers persist. The altar remains, and the witch claimed it as her own. But was she merely a woman with knowledge of ancient rites, or something more? A sorceress who had found a way to bind herself to the Vatican's oldest relics. That might explain why she could not be executed, why her memory could not be erased, because her essence had already sunk into the sacred stones themselves. The Swiss Guards' encounter in the 1980s begins to make more sense in this light. A ghostly figure vanishing into the wall, her chanting reverberating in the stone corridors. It wasn't an apparition floating in the air. It was the wall itself, the stone, breathing her presence back into the night. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. Some Vatican historians, quietly and only in private, admit that the witch may not have been an isolated figure. She may have been part of a lineage. Witches, priestesses, oracles, call them what you will, keepers of the stones. In pagan Rome, these women were not evil but revered, believed to channel the voices of the gods through sacred objects and altars. What if the Vatican witch was the last of them, the final guardian of the necropolis before Christianity consumed it? If so, then silencing her was not just about erasing a woman. It was about erasing an entire tradition, one that threatened the very foundations of Catholic power. But sometimes, erasing does not destroy, it awakens. Because after her disappearance, strange events began plaguing the Vatican. Candles snuffed themselves out during Mass. Statues wept not with holy tears, but with streaks of blood-red moisture no one could explain. Priests reported voices whispering in their ears at night, always in tongues older than Latin. And in the underground necropolis, workers complained of sudden chills, dizziness, and the sensation of being watched by eyes hidden deep within the stone. The Vatican did what it always does in times of unease. It locked the records away. Yet these whispers escaped, passed down like rumors in the dark, and they all pointed to one thing. The witch had not been destroyed. She had merged with the stones, becoming eternal, waiting for the day her curse would be fully realized. But what was the curse? What had she sworn upon those sacred stones? Some say she promised that every pope who tried to hide the truth would die haunted, his spirit dragged into the catacombs upon death. Others whisper that the Vatican itself will one day fall, its great dome collapsing into the necropolis beneath, swallowed by the very stones it tried to sanctify. Whether these curses are real or not, history does not help the Vatican's case. At least 6 popes died under mysterious circumstances following her supposed trial. Some grew suddenly ill, their bodies racked by fevers no physician could explain. One was found dead in his chamber, his face frozen in terror, as though he had seen someone or something waiting in the shadows. Another, it is said, cried out on his deathbed, "She is here! The woman of black is here!" before his breath failed him. Coincidence? Perhaps. But when coincidence repeats itself, century after century, it begins to look less like chance and more like a curse woven into the Vatican's very stones. And even now, in the modern day, tourists who descend into the Vatican necropolis, on the rare guided tours allowed by the Church, report the same unnerving sensations. The air grows heavier, colder. The walls seem too close. Some claim they hear faint whispers. Others insist they see shadows moving in the corner of their vision, disappearing when they turn. Guides dismiss it all as imagination, but is it really imagination when the same story is told by dozens of unrelated visitors? Imagine standing there, deep underground, surrounded by graves carved nearly 2,000 years ago. Imagine feeling a breath against your ear, though no one is near you. Imagine seeing an inscription on the wall, its letters eroded but still faintly glowing under torchlight, and realizing you cannot read it, yet somehow you understand it says, "She is not gone." The Vatican insists these are only legends, distortions meant to thrill the curious. But the stones have a way of telling their own truth. And if the witch is indeed bound to them, then every prayer whispered in the basilica, every mass sung above, every secret plotted in the papal chambers, all of it echoes through her. She hears it, she watches, and she waits. But here is the real question, one that chills even the most skeptical. What if the witch's curse was never about haunting or vengeance? What if it was about something greater, something she was guarding? What if the witch of the Vatican was not trying to destroy the church, but to keep something sealed beneath it? Because hidden within the stones of the Vatican, beneath the tombs, beneath even the relics of saints, some believe there is an object older than Rome itself, a relic so dangerous, so unholy, that only by binding herself to the stones could the witch ensure it never rose again. And in our next descent into this terrifying tale, we will peel back those stones to uncover the relic itself, an artifact whispered of in forbidden texts, an object of power that could explain why the Vatican still trembles whenever her name is spoken. If the stones remembered her, then what were they hiding? The witch's curse, her whispered vow to the foundations, was never just about revenge. The signs point to something much older, buried beneath the Vatican, a relic that predates the Church, predates Rome, perhaps predates all civilization itself. But here is the disturbing part. Traces of its existence can still be found, not in dusty folklore, but in fragments of Vatican records that were never meant to leave their archives. In 1929, the Lateran Treaty gave the Vatican sovereignty as its own state. But hidden in the flood of documents from that year, historians later uncovered a reference to Il Sigillo Oscuro, the Dark Seal. It appeared in a classified index, listed under artifacts of non-Christian origin held in the possession of the Church, not to be displayed, not to be discussed. No description, no photograph, only a chilling footnote. Removed from beneath the basilica foundations, kept under perpetual guard. Some claim this seal is what the witch swore to protect, or perhaps to imprison. Whispers say it is not an object of beauty, but of terror. A disk of black stone etched with symbols no scholar has ever translated, its surface shifting as though the carvings resist being read. Those who gaze too long upon it speak of headaches, visions, even madness. One Jesuit priest in the 17th century, assigned briefly to study the relic, supposedly clawed his own eyes out after 3 nights of staring at it, screaming that the symbols move when the shadows move. And here is where the witch returns to the story. Some researchers believe she was the last in a line of guardians bound to this relic. Pagan priestesses had sworn to keep the seal buried, to prevent it from ever being used or awakened. When the church began digging, when holy ground was laid upon unholy stone, she appeared, not to defy the church, but to defend the world from what lay beneath it. If this is true, then the Vatican witch was not a villain, not a sorceress drunk on power, but a sentinel. And her so-called curse may not have been a curse at all, it may have been a warning. But the Vatican does not deal in warnings, it deals in control. When she confronted the priests and masons of her time, demanding they leave the relic undisturbed, they branded her a heretic. When she tried to stop the excavation of the old necropolis, she was accused of consorting with demons. And when they finally captured her, they sealed her fate in the most brutal way imaginable. Execution by fire, though records suggest her body did not burn. Witnesses claimed the flames bent away from her form, as though the stones themselves protected her. Her last words, shouted through the smoke, are said to have been, "If you unseal it, it will not be me you face. It will be the end of all light." After that day, the seal vanished from public knowledge. Only whispers in secret texts keep its name alive, and yet, strange incidents keep pulling it back into the light. In 1943, during the chaos of World War II, German officers briefly occupied parts of Rome. Documents declassified decades later reveal that an SS occult division, obsessed with relics of power, attempted to infiltrate the Vatican catacombs. Their goal: recover the seal. No soldiers returned. Their bodies were never found. The official Vatican explanation? They became lost in the tunnels. But locals told a different story. They whispered that the stones themselves swallowed the men, their screams echoing through the necropolis for nights afterward, fading only when the Vatican sealed the chambers again. Still, the seal's shadow surfaces again and again. A British archaeologist in the 1960s, granted rare access beneath the basilica, reported sketching a black disc hidden in a reliquary chest. He never published his notes, because he was found dead 2 weeks later in his London flat, his walls covered in hand-scrawled circles and spirals that no one could decipher. The official cause of death? Suicide. But the drawings? Still archived, still unexplained. So what exactly is the Dark Seal? Theories abound. Some say it is a pagan altar stone, infused with centuries of blood sacrifice. Others claim it is not Roman at all, but something far older, something unearthed when the first settlers dug foundations along the Tiber. A relic from a civilization erased from history, perhaps even pre-human. But the most terrifying theory? That it is not a relic at all, that it is a prison carved in stone, containing something that should never be released, something the witch gave her soul to guard. And this is where the curse begins to make sense. Because if she truly bound her essence to the Vatican stones, she wasn't haunting them. She was anchoring herself. She was ensuring that her presence would linger as a warden, a keeper of the seal, even after death. But here's the question that chills the Vatican most. If the witch is gone, if her presence is fading after centuries, then who or what guards the seal now? Modern whispers hint at unease inside the Vatican. Priests report shadows moving in chambers where no light should bend. Guards stationed near sealed doors hear scratching sounds on the other side, like stone grinding against stone. Tourists descending into the necropolis claim to feel heat radiating from one wall, as though something burns just beneath the surface. And then there is the most disturbing clue of all. In 2019, a journalist investigating hidden archives stumbled upon a line in a translated 15th century text. It read simply, "When the witch is forgotten, the seal will break." If that is true, then every attempt to erase her from history, every effort to silence her name, is not destroying her curse. It is fulfilling it. So what happens when the witch is no longer remembered? What if we are already standing on the edge of that moment? The Vatican does not answer. It never does. But the stones still whisper, and the shadows still move, and if you listen closely enough, perhaps you will hear it too. A heartbeat, not your own, not human, rising from deep beneath the basilica. And that leaves us with one final question. If the seal breaks, what comes out? They say Rome never forgets, that its stones remember every whisper, every scream, every prayer. The Vatican, cloaked in its holiness, carries secrets that stretch far beyond papal decrees and sacred rituals. But some secrets are darker than Scripture allows, some tales so chilling that they are buried under centuries of silence. Tonight, we ask, what if the shadow of a witch still lingers in the very heart of the Vatican? Not long ago, a Vatican archivist anonymously confessed to a journalist that he had seen a forbidden book, its leather cover cracked, its symbols scorched into the hide as though branded by fire itself. The archivist claimed that the book was chained to the wall inside the secret apostolic archive, a place where only a select handful of men are permitted entry. He described its pages as written in Latin, Greek, and an unknown script that appeared to shift under the eye. Letters bending like serpents. But the most terrifying thing, he swore that whenever he touched the chains, he felt them tremble, as if the book itself was alive, or watching. Could this be the lost grimoire of the Witch of the Vatican, the same woman who was said to curse Rome with her dying breath? Was this the cursed text that priests once tried to burn, but which refused to turn to ash? Before we go deeper into this chilling tale, if you've made it this far into the shadows with me, hit that subscribe button right now, because the darkness we're about to explore only grows heavier, and you don't want to face it alone. Now, let us return. In the 1970s, restoration workers inside the Vatican Library were repairing a fresco when they discovered a hidden alcove. Within the hollowed wall was a small wooden box sealed with wax. When cracked open, it revealed a set of bones wrapped in fragments of velvet. A skull, jaw still intact, with teeth sharper than expected for a human. Alongside it lay a medallion etched with a symbol, a crescent moon pierced by a cross. Vatican officials quickly removed the remains and declared them medieval relics, but whispers among the workers told a different story. That these were the bones of the witch herself, hidden away so that her spirit could not escape. One worker swore he heard footsteps echoing behind him, even though no one else was in the corridor. Another claimed that a fresco depicting St. Peter's martyrdom bled fresh red pigment during the discovery, as though weeping at the disturbance. The Vatican never confirmed these reports, but they never denied them either. And then there are the guards. The Swiss Guard, renowned for their colorful uniforms and rigid discipline, are said to tell ghost stories among themselves during night shifts. One tale is repeated often. A woman draped in a black cloak who wanders the gardens at 3 a.m., her feet never touching the ground. They call her La Strega di Roma, the Witch of Rome. She is described as both beautiful and horrifying, her face flickering between that of a young maiden and a hollow-eyed corpse. Some say she stops before the window of the Pope's chambers and whispers in a language no living man understands. But the most unnerving story comes from 1981, when Pope John Paul II survived an assassination attempt. While recovering, it is said he confided in close aides that he had felt a shadow standing at his bedside in the moments before the shooting. A figure with long hair, whispering, "The blood of the Lamb will not wash away the blood of the betrayed." His aides insisted it was a fever dream. But the Pope, he had seen enough in his lifetime to know when a presence was real. What if the Vatican witch is not merely a story, but an eternal reminder of the dangers that dwell within ambition, power, and suppressed knowledge? What if she lingers still, not bound by death, but tied to the very stones of the Vatican? Fast forward to the present. Pilgrims and tourists alike report strange sensations inside St. Peter's Basilica. Some claim they feel an icy wind near the altar, even when the air is still. Others say their photographs show shadowy figures standing behind them, figures not seen by the naked eye. Most chilling of all are the whispers. Recordings made by visitors sometimes pick up faint chanting in languages that no one can quite identify. Experts say it's just echoes or interference. But believers insist it's the witch's curse speaking through time. And then there's the stone. Legend says the witch was executed on a slab of black marble deep within the city, a stone that absorbed her final scream. That stone, according to rumor, was taken and repurposed into the foundations of the Vatican itself. Imagine it, every mass, every sermon, every holy decree delivered upon the bones of a cursed foundation. Perhaps that's why her spirit cannot rest. One night in 2015, lightning struck St. Peter's Basilica. The photograph went viral, shocking millions across the globe. To the faithful, it was a natural event. To the fearful, it was something more, a sign. Old Vatican rumors resurfaced, that lightning is the witch's voice, her fury tearing the skies when her name is whispered too often in forbidden chambers. That the Vatican, no matter how powerful, cannot silence her forever. Even today, whispers claim that deep below the Vatican lies a hidden crypt, where forbidden artifacts are sealed. Some say it contains the remains of fallen angels, others that it holds books of dark incantations gathered from across the centuries. But one story continues to rise above the rest, that somewhere beneath Rome, locked in chains that never rust, lies the full remains of the Vatican witch, and that her eyes are still intact, glowing faintly in the dark, watching, waiting. So here we are, standing between faith and fear, history and nightmare. The Vatican tells us it is the holiest place on earth. But what if beneath the gilded altars and sacred hymns lies a darkness so deep that even the popes dare not speak of it? What if the witch of the Vatican was not a myth, not just a relic of medieval paranoia, but a power still alive, still moving, still haunting Rome's eternal heart? The question is not whether you believe. The question is, when you stand in the shadows of the Vatican, do you feel someone watching you too?